Tywin Lannister is sitting on a privy when his son kills him. Not on a battlefield, not in a throne room, on a toilet, with his breeches around his ankles, looking at the son he spent 40 years treating as an embarrassment. And for the first time in either of their lives, Tywin cannot find a way to make the moment work for him. Most people remember this scene as the moment Tyrion finally snapped, found Shae in his father's bed, killed her in grief and rage, then went upstairs and finished it. That reading is not wrong. It is just not the whole story. The crossbow does not fire because of Shae. Shae is the match, but the fuel, the specific, accumulated decades-old fuel, has a name that the show almost never says out loud. Her name is Tysha, and if you do not know what Tywin did to her, you do not yet understand why Tyrion's hand is steady when he pulls the trigger. Start with what happens in that tower room. Not the killing, the conversation before it. Tyrion climbs the stairs carrying a crossbow. He is not shaking. He is not crying. People who have just committed a crime of passion, strangling a lover in shock and grief, do not typically walk upstairs with steady hands and a loaded weapon. They collapse. They freeze. They run. Tyrion climbs. This is the first tell that what is about to happen is not impulsive. It is the completion of something that has been building for a very long time. He finds Tywin and he says two things before the conversation turns. He tells him he is no longer his son, and he tells him he is going to die tonight. Tywin, and this is the most psychologically revealing thing in the entire scene, does not believe him. Watch that moment carefully. Tywin Lannister, one of the most politically intelligent men in Westeros, a man who has navigated wars and betrayals and succession crises for 4 decades, looks at his son holding a loaded crossbow and says, "You are no assassin." He is not performing calm. He genuinely cannot process the possibility that Tyrion would do this. Because in Tywin's internal model of the world, Tyrion is not a person capable of genuine threat. He is a problem to be managed, a liability to be directed. He is, at most, a clever dwarf who occasionally makes himself useful. Tywin has spent so long refusing to see Tyrion as real that he cannot see the danger in front of him, even when it has a crossbow. This is the psychology of a man who built his entire relationship with his son around the premise of Tyrion's irrelevance. And it is about to kill him. Shame-based identity. A person who builds their entire sense of self around trying to disprove a verdict that was handed down about them before they were old enough to resist it. Tyrion was born into Tywin's verdict. The dwarf, the monster, the one who killed Joanna Lannister by existing. He did not earn that verdict. He inherited it at birth. And everything he ever did, the wit, the wine, the endless performance of not caring, was built on top of it, not underneath it. The problem with building identity on top of shame rather than through it is that the foundation always shows. Every success Tyrion achieves is filtered through Tywin's original assessment. He becomes Hand of the King. Tywin returns and takes it. He saves King's Landing at the Blackwater. Tywin gets the credit and Tyrion gets a scar and a smaller room. He falls in love, and this is where it gets specific. Tywin takes the love and makes it into a lesson. This happened twice. And the second time, everyone was watching. But here is what nobody asks about the privy scene. Tyrion calls his father a father twice. He says it specifically, pointedly. "You are my father," not as an appeal, as an accusation. He is not asking Tywin to finally acknowledge him. He gave up on that long before this room. He is naming what Tywin was precisely so that what Tywin did has its full weight. A stranger who destroys your life is a villain. A father who destroys your life is something that does not have a clean word for it. And then Tywin says it. He calls Shae a whore, with the flat confidence of a man who believes his assessments are simply factual. Not cruel, not targeted, just accurate. Tywin does not consider himself a cruel man. He considers himself a realistic one. Tyrion tells him not to say that word. Tywin says it again. Now compounded. Now casual. "You're afraid of a dead whore?" As if the second time is even less of an effort than the first. As if Tyrion's warning registered as nothing. And here is the psychological precision of what is actually happening in this exchange. Tyrion does not warn his father twice because he is indecisive. He warns him twice because some part of him is still, even here, even now, giving his father one more chance to be something other than what he has always been. The warning is not tactical. It is the last reflex of a son who spent 40 years hoping the next interaction would be different. It never was. The crossbow fires. That is the scene everyone knows. But the scene that explains it, the one that makes the privy confrontation psychologically legible, happens 40 minutes earlier in a dungeon cell, and most viewers have watched it a dozen times without knowing what was cut from it. The show gives you a goodbye. Jaime enters the black cells carrying a torch. He unlocks Tyrion's door. He tells him there is a galley waiting, that Varys will open the door at the top of the stairs. They embrace. Tyrion says, "Thank you for my life." Jaime says nothing. Tyrion walks into the tunnel. It is brief, it is tender, and it is a lie of omission so complete that it quietly broke everything that followed. Because in George R.R. Martin's novels, in the story that the showrunners chose not to film, Jaime does not just open the cell door. He confesses. He tells Tyrion that Tysha was not a prostitute. He tells him that Jaime lied on Tywin's orders, that Tysha was exactly who Tyrion believed she was when he was 16, a crofter's daughter who loved him freely, without payment, without arrangement, with full knowledge of who he was. That Tyrion's first love was real, and Tywin destroyed it anyway. Here is what the show never told you. Tywin did not simply send Tysha away and tell Tyrion she was a prostitute. In the books, he had his guards assault her in front of Tyrion. Then he made Tyrion participate, and he paid her in gold coins, Lannister gold, one per soldier, because he said, a Lannister is worth more. He made his 16-year-old son complicit in the destruction of his own love. And when it was over, when Tysha was gone, when whatever remained of Tyrion's capacity to believe he was worth loving had been systematically dismantled, Tyrion asked where she had been taken. Tywin's answer, "Wherever whores go." The show kept that phrase. It let Tyrion mutter it in Season 4 with a haunted, hollow repetition. Where do whores go? As if it were just an odd verbal tick that Varys had to manage. It left the words in and stripped out everything that makes them devastating. Because in the books, Tyrion does not repeat that phrase as a question. He repeats it as the verdict his father handed down on everyone he would ever love. They will all end up wherever whores go. Because that is what love is for someone like you. The showrunners confirmed the Tysha cut was deliberate. They have never fully explained it. What they left behind was a version of Tyrion who spends seasons 5, 6, and 7 in exile, wine-soaked and directionless, making choices that look like self-destruction. And they gave the audience no psychological reason for the depth of the fall. They cut the floor out from under him, and then were surprised when viewers found his arc unconvincing. This is the psychology term that names what Tywin did across Tyrion's entire life. Coercive control. A pattern of behavior in which one person uses psychological tactics, including the destruction of the target's relationships, their sense of self, and their access to love, to maintain dominance over them. What Tywin practiced on Tyrion was not cold indifference. Cold indifference would have been easier to survive. It was strategic, emotional demolition. Every time Tyrion built something, a relationship, a reputation, a reason to feel like a Lannister, Tywin located the structural support and removed it. So think about what that means for a man who spent 20 years living inside the story that he was so unlovable that his first wife had to be paid. The original verdict, the one Tywin handed down when Tyrion was 16, the one that shaped every relationship he ever had after, every woman he kept at a slight distance, every time he chose to pay rather than to ask, that verdict was a constructed lie. Tywin did not tell Tyrion the truth about Tysha because the truth was too painful for a son to hear. He built the lie because a Tyrion who believed his love was fake was a Tyrion who would never trust love again. And a Tyrion who could not trust love was a Tyrion who would always, on some level, need his father. In the books, when Jaime tells him the truth in that cell, Tyrion does not walk toward the exit. He walks toward the stairs that lead to Tywin's chambers. The show cut the confession. But it could not cut what the confession explains. The crossbow was always going upstairs. The show just never told you why. And that is where the real psychology begins, because Tyrion does not go to Tywin directly. He goes to find Shae. Climbs to his father's chambers. He finds a woman in his father's bed, and for a fraction of a second, before he sees the face, before the confirmation arrives, he already knows. The specific horror of this moment is not that Shae is there. It is that she was always going to be there. Not because of any particular failing of Shae's character, but because Tywin Lannister follows a pattern that goes back to a crofter's daughter when Tyrion was 16 years old. Find what Tyrion loves. Use it. Discard it. Shae stirs under the covers. She turns. She sees him. She says, "My lion." The name she called him when she believed, or performed believing, that he was someone worth protecting. And then her face changes. She reaches for the knife on the bedside table. Tyrion kills her. He says, "I'm sorry," while his hands are still around her throat. He says it again. He keeps saying it after she has stopped moving, as if repetition could retroactively make it something other than what it is. Most analyses of this scene focus on that grief. The horror on his face, the apology that arrives too late and too much. That reading is real. The grief is genuine. But there is something else happening in the stillness before the fight. Before she reaches for the knife. Before any of the violence. Tyrion looks at her and he is completely silent. Moral injury. The specific damage that occurs not from fear or threat, but from being forced to act against one's own deepest values. And from discovering that the world you believed in was not the world you were actually living in. Tyrion believed, despite the trial, despite the testimony, despite everything Shae said on that stand, that somewhere underneath the betrayal was the woman he had actually known. He is looking at his father's bed and the evidence that there was not. Or that if there was, it did not matter. The woman he loved and the woman in his father's bed occupy the same body. He cannot separate them. Neither can he walk away. Tywin built this. He built it 20 years ago with a gold coin and a verdict about where whores go. He built the psychological architecture inside which this exact moment was always going to happen. The crossbow is already loaded when Tyrion walks upstairs. The grief was already written. What the privy scene contains, what the viewer feels but the show never quite names, is the specific devastation of a person who has just realized the damage was done on purpose. There is a particular kind of grief that arrives when you understand that your suffering was not the side effect of someone else's carelessness. That it was the intended outcome. That the man who was supposed to protect you from the world was building the world you needed protecting from. Tyrion does not hate Tywin at the end of that tower room. Or not only hate him, what he feels is older and more precise than hatred. It is the grief of a son who spent 40 years trying to earn something from a father who had decided, before the son could walk, that he would never give it. When Tyrion fires the crossbow, he is not punishing Tywin for Shae. He is not even, primarily, punishing him for Tysha, though Tysha is the wound that makes everything else possible. He is ending the only relationship in his life where he was never allowed to exist as a full person. He is walking out of the verdict. Tywin's last words are telling. He says, "You are no son of mine." He has been saying it for 40 years. In that room for the first time, he means it differently, as if disowning Tyrion in his final moment is still a weapon he can use, as if the power to define Tyrion's worth is still his to exercise. Tyrion fires again, because the weapon only works on someone who is still waiting for the verdict to change. Tyrion stopped waiting. The show never showed you when. The books did. It happened in a dungeon cell, in a conversation that was never filmed, when a brother told the truth that a father had buried for 20 years. The question that remains, the one this video cannot fully close, is what Tyrion becomes after that night. He leaves King's Landing carrying 2 deaths and 1 revelation he was never actually given on screen. He spends 3 seasons in exile, wine-soaked and directionless, making choices that look like self-destruction to everyone around him and look, from the inside, like a man who no longer has a structure to push against. The shame-based identity does not simply dissolve when the father dies. The verdict does not disappear when the man who issued it is gone. Tyrion spent 40 years building his self-concept inside Tywin's frameworks. The framework persists even after the architect is dead. What he does with that, whether he ever finds something equivalent to what Tysha represented, whether he builds a self that does not require his father's approval as its negative space, that is a question the show ultimately cannot answer. Because the show cut the scene that would have made the question legible. The crossbow fires in that tower room. The bolt lands. Tywin Lannister dies on a privy. And the last thing his son says to him is nothing. Tyrion is already walking away. He never needed a verdict from Tywin. He needed to stop needing one. The crossbow was how he finally stopped. There was a girl named Tysha. She loved him. And Tywin Lannister spent the rest of his life making sure his son never believed it. The show cut the scene where Tyrion found out the truth, which means every viewer who cried at that privy scene was crying for a wound they were never fully shown. Wherever whores go.